Aloha and welcome to Maui Mana'o. I'm your host, Alan Teixeira, and today we'll be discussing Maui issues with the Maui State Senators, Senator J. Kalani English, Senator Ross Baker, and Senate President, Senator Shan Tsutsui. Welcome, Senators. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Aloha. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Yes.
The topic of our first question has recently been in the news. The State Department of Transportation has recently stated that the runway at Kahului Airport is in need of repairs. Can you please explain why this is necessary and how this will impact travel to and from Maui?
Well, the first thing to know is that we have to keep a safe runway in Maui, and that's paramount. That's what's happening here. The subsurface of our airport is very old. It's from the 40s, and so that's it's giving way, and so they have to shore that up or put a new subsurface in, and it's just to allow for our planes to continue coming in. So the question is, how do we repair the runway and at the same time keep air traffic flowing? So the department is working very hard to accomplish that goal, and we're working very hard to make sure that we do the repairs and we also keep the airport open.
Because that airport is really our lifeblood. We want to make sure that commerce continues, as well as island residents have an opportunity to do their air travel, and visitors can come in as well. So we want to make sure that the airport is safe, and we want the airports department to do their work as efficiently and as rapidly as possible.
And I think, with the budget woes on the federal level, one of the things that has been happening for the last several years is that the Kahului Airport runway was receiving federal dollars to do a lot of the repair and maintenance work. But recently, the Hawaii Department of Transportation has received notice from the FAA saying that it would no longer be in receipt of some of these repair and maintenance funds. So, and I think that's why it kind of spurred and stimulated this desire to try to do a complete resurfacing of the runway. And as Senator English said, the runway was built back in the 40s, and from our understanding, the runway was never designed or built to accommodate the type of heavy aircraft that currently come into Maui. It was actually built as a military runway, which is why it makes it a little different than from some of the other neighbor islands that also have one single runway.
Is there a timetable, and you think, when repairs might begin, or is there a deadline or anything like that?
Well, we've been briefed by the department that they're working on a plan. They're working on a timetable. They're working on funding mechanisms to do this. But the one thing that's very clear from all of us and from governor's office and others is that we're not going to shut down the airport.
No.
So the airport will stay open, and we're going to find a way to keep the current air traffic that we have. Because it's our lifeline, as Senator Baker said, it's our cargo coming in, our food coming in, also our visitors and our inter-island workers and travelers. So what it did for me, and I'm sure for the other senators and reps as well, is that it made us really realize how dependent we are on that airport, and also then made me start thinking about, we need to make sure that in the future there's a very strong repair and maintenance program for them. They do now. They do a good program, but oftentimes we sort of get caught up in everything else, and this brought it home that, okay, they do a good job. We have to continue supporting them doing it.
And the one thing I think we want to assure everybody that's listening is the airport is safe. They're continuing to do the patching that is necessary, but we don't want the situation to deteriorate so that maybe a plane coming in, busts a landing gear or something like that, and then really creates problems. We want to be very proactive, and I appreciate that DOT wants to be proactive too, with a little prodding from the FAA to make sure that we get it on a time schedule, we have a good plan, we involve all the stakeholders, and we make sure that the runway gets repaired so that we don't have to do so many Band-Aid fixes in the future.
Understand.
And along those lines, in terms of the timeline, I think the first thing that the DOT is going to do once they complete their due diligence and have all the different options available is that we're going to have community meetings throughout Maui County to make sure that everybody understands, what the plan is and what the approach is. And I think at that time, then the DOT will have a better idea as to when possible construction would start, as well as when the total project might be completed.
Thank you, Senators. I think everyone will be happy hearing that the runway will stay open. If we can move on to our next question. Following the U.S. Census every 10 years, boundaries for legislative districts are reviewed and reapportioned. Can you please discuss some of the changes that have been made on Maui, as well as the possible rationales behind them?
Yeah. Well, I think kind of in a snapshot, there's not going to be a whole lot of change for Maui County. I think that's kind of a fortunate thing. There is a pending lawsuit. The Supreme Court is currently reviewing that lawsuit. We should know soon. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but it may be decided before then. But I think ultimately whether the Supreme Court decides that that we should count military or not count military, and whether that gives an extra senatorial seat to the Big Island or leaves it here on Oahu, I think the impact to Maui County will be somewhat minimal. And so there will be a few changes. Senator English's district will get a little larger, and he can tell you about that.
Well, right, exactly. You might see on the graphic that my district used to split Paia, and now Paia is whole, and it actually goes all the way to Haleakala Highway and comes down and includes the airport now. So Sprecklesville joins the 6th Senatorial District. And I think that's about it. I mean, that's the area that we expanded. Molokai, Lanai, Kaho'olawe remains in the district. Kula, upcountry, east Maui. But we get this whole new area. So, I'm looking forward to that. I think it actually recognizes those communities as one community. But other than that, I don't know. Did your district change?
Well, Representative McKelvey's part of my district, the Lahaina part, actually changed a boundary line, but there's no residents in the area. So instead of beginning at North Kihei Road after the Malaya area, it goes all the way over to, and now includes Maui Tropical Plantation, but stops just short of the Waikapu community. So unless there are buildings across from Ma'alaya, we don't have any new voters in that part.
So, as Senator Tsutsui said, our boundaries have relatively remained the same. And it's a reapportionment year, which means that everybody's up for election. So the 3 senators will be up, as well as all the House members.
Yeah, and I think what's also interesting is that when you look at Oahu, and I think a lot of the senators are really paying attention to their lines, and whether it's on this side of the street or that side of the street, and yet for the 3 of us, because we've always worked closely together, I mean, we really don't have these boundaries, or we don't see them. Senator English's or Senator Baker's constituents are my constituents, and vice versa. And so we've always had this approach that we work together as a team, and we make sure that whatever issues affect one definitely affects us too. So, yeah.
Excellent. This is a next question. There are numerous improvement projects in various stages of completion throughout the county of Maui. Would you like to point out or highlight any particular projects?
Well, there's a one that's just being completed. The Department of Education is going to take over probably in a short order, and that's the new cafeteria at Lahaina Luna High School. So that's a great asset for the school up there. It allows the students to all eat together, or maybe in 2 stages rather than in 4, and it can also double as a performing arts center. So that's a really exciting addition. And then of course the other school that I'm very excited to make sure it continues to move forward is the new high school in Kihei. The draft environmental impact statement has been completed. It's out for public comment. We're working very closely with the DOE as well as Westlow, our Maui Board of Ed member, to make sure that we can continue to move that project on to completion, and want to make sure it gets built as rapidly as possible, because that school impacts what we might need to do at Maui High and at Baldwin, because that's where the students from Kihei are going.
In our area, we have the Paia cafeteria, the Paia Elementary School cafeteria, which all of us worked very hard to get, and the groundbreaking happened, and they're in the process of building that. So for the first time in many years, the kids in Paia will be able to sit down at the same, in a cafeteria, and have lunches that are prepared there, because they were bringing them in by truck before, to the school.
They had to eat in shifts too.
Yeah, they're eating in shifts.
And that was all because of a fire a few years ago.
Wow.
So this is just replacing the the former the cafeteria. So I think that's good news. In Central Maui, we have a new elementary school, Pu'ukukui Elementary School, which we broke ground on a couple months ago. So I think these things do a number of things, right? Obviously, one, it serves the needs of the Department of Education and for our keiki, but it also provides much needed jobs and in an attempt to try to also stimulate the economy. So we're really excited that there are a lot of these new projects that are finally coming to fruition on back home in Maui.
Well, and the governor's just announced the release of some additional repair and maintenance funds. Kamehameha Third School in Lahaina is finally getting its whole school renovation. They're starting to paint it and change out the windows. And Maui Community College, their science building is coming along quite well. And we also have some new repair items at the hospital. So there are a lot of things that are just starting to come online. And people say, well, the repair and maintenance projects aren't that big ticket item, but there's a lot of our small contractors that can hire in and bid on those projects, and it really helps our, the folks that are on the bench in some of our trades, as well as just making sure that people continue to have work.
And we have, some of the remote areas of Maui County in Hana, we have the Hana Small Boat Harbor renovations, rebuilding. They're more than halfway through. They're almost done. And at some point, they're going to start on the pier side, which is a really big project. Some things that on Lanai, it's the school buildings that are in process of being built. God, I'm drawing a blank from Molokai. Sorry.
Aren't they also moving on that Ma'alaya Harbor too?
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
that one is coming along quite nicely, and that's going to make such a difference when all of those renovations are done. It includes a little packaged sewer treatment plant for the harbor, upgrades in the pump outs, providing pump outs, upgrades in electric, as well as improving the old Sea Flight building. It's now going to be the harbor facility and actually
Wow.
make it a very, very user-friendly harbor. So it's a delight to see, and we've got a renovation going on at the Lahaina Small Boat Harbor as well. And our bypass continues to plug along, so they're making great progress with the various phases, and I think we're getting ready to start another phase, so it'll make the traffic flow much better.
Excellent. CFPs always sound like a great idea because it helps the community while offering local jobs.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it takes on the average about 4 to 5 years from, when we create a CIP project till the time it actually breaks ground. So the things that are breaking ground and being built now are things that we talked about 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And so, we often have to tell our constituents that it takes a while. We need a lot of time to put it in, and we need the governor to release it, then we need the contracts to be let. And once all of that is done, then the project's happen.
Procurement, yeah.
It's a long process.
And and between the three of us from Maui County, we have a lot in the pipeline coming down. It's just going to take a little time to get it there.
And we're hoping that with the economy looking a little bit better, that we'll be able to do more of the repair and maintenance things that have been backlogged, and maybe even help out some of our nonprofits with some of their important CIP.
Excellent. Thank you, Senators. Next question. Foreclosures on Maui were pretty grim, with nearly 1,000 single-family homes pending foreclosure. Do you feel the situation has improved with some of the new laws that were introduced?
I certainly do. It's not a perfect fix because we don't have control of all of the situation, but we have seen a slowdown in the number of homes going to foreclosure. The banks and the lending institutions are having to take a really hard look at whether they have all their paperwork in order before they can foreclose. Many of them, because we put a moratorium on the old style of non-judicial foreclosure, have just held off and are thinking about going into judicial foreclosure. But in talking with the real estate community, I'm finding that more of the short sales are happening. More of the bank-owned houses are going into the market, and that can help those who need to find a house. And also we're seeing that the judiciary is really cooperating with the borrowers and honoring requests to go into mediation, even if it's in a judicial foreclosure. So even though we haven't had a lot of people in the mediation program that our legislation set up, we have seen that people are being allowed to stay in their homes longer, and that's really what we wanted. We wanted to make sure that the process was fair and that people got a good shake. So if anybody out there is getting a foreclosure notice, they need to respond to that notice. They need to ask for mediation if it's going into the judicial process. And our judiciary is working very diligently to set up their own mediation program that's modeled after the one that we enacted. They're had a pilot project on the Big Island a couple years ago. They're going to, bring that back online and beef it up, and they're really working with their judges to make sure that, everything is done as appropriately as it possibly can be. So even though, we know that people still are going to be facing foreclosure, we think that we've done a number of mitigations that are going to help homeowners stay in their homes as long as they can, get a loan modification, get some other payment plan, and work something out that may be to their benefit.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I think one thing that I've learned in this whole process, watching the foreclosures and learning about how this works, is that, borrowers, get your paperwork together. Because a lot of times the banks don't have it together, and if they don't have it together, when you go to court, you can say, look, this document wasn't properly transferred. These things weren't properly endorsed, properly signed, and it makes a difference. But, it's the lender that has to, the borrower, the person that borrowed the money, that has to really keep track of their
Yes.
paperwork. Because we've seen a number of cases where, you can see very clearly that the paperwork was not in order, but they're in foreclosure, and the banks are saying, we're going to go for it anyway. So, it's the best defense is to know what documents are there.
And Ellen, and I would like to give credit where credit is due, and I think Maui is very fortunate that Senator Baker has really been the champion of this whole issue. A couple years ago, she passed legislation that created a task force, a working group to try to come up with specific legislation last year. So you had a lot of industry experts who were at the table. We had a measure. It went through the entire process. And we all know normally a bill takes more than a single session to get passed. To her credit, she was able to get all of her colleagues on board, and have us understand this very complex issue. And pass legislation. And normally what happens after we pass legislation is legislators kind of move on to the next thing. Well, Senator Baker never stopped, and even though that piece of law was enacted as an act, she continued to work, and this task force continued to work together to try to make sure that whatever things could be improved upon on the legislation that was passed last year was. And so, this hasn't been like an overnight thing. This is a little over 2 years, and we really credit Roz. Senator Baker was the one who definitely took the bull by the horns and moved forward on this thing. So, so for people like us, and we can sit here and take a little bit of the credit, but really, we hats off to her.
Absolutely.
And so she did this not just for the people of Maui County, but for the entire state. So it's a really, really good thing.
Thank you so much, Senator Baker.
Well, there's a little bit more work we've got to do this session, but we'll keep at it.
For our next question, I was hoping we could touch a little bit on our energy projects in Maui. The County of Maui has many sustainable energy projects out there. Can we describe some of the projects out there and how they will benefit Maui?
Wow.
You guys have a lot of sustainable energy projects.
Yeah, we do. The County of Maui just signed a MOU with Japan for a smart grid study to look at how we can do that in Maui. We have, I know in Peahi, Eric Bryant and others have small scale solar farms, so they're looking at the questions of interconnect and all of these things. Of course, we have wind on Maui. We have Ulupalakua. We also have proposals for Lanai, proposals for Molokai. And on those 2 points, wind works for us in Maui. It produces something like, the last numbers I heard were 20 some odd % of our power. Molokai and Lanai are the two different issues, and Lanai is one issue, and Molokai is a completely different one. So let's take Molokai. The proposal for the wind farm on Molokai is to go on to Molokai Ranch land, an outside company coming into Molokai Ranch land, and producing power and selling that to Oahu. I would say a good 80–90% of the people that I've talked to in Molokai are adamantly against that project. Molokai has said over the years that they want subsistence lifestyle. And I mean, I for one, as a policymaker for Molokai and understanding that they want subsistence, we're saying fine. We don't have to connect Molokai this way. Lanai, well, it's a different issue altogether. The landowner wants to do the wind farms. The population has dropped dramatically on Lanai, to the point where we're worried about carrying capacity for that island, whether or not goods and services can be sustained to keep a small population. And the landowner is, contemplating selling the island, is contemplating all sorts of things because he loses lots of money every year on the island. So, that's a different story. And really, we have to keep in mind that connecting the islands by cable is a statewide initiative. And it's really dealing with, connecting Big Island, Maui, Oahu, Molokai, Lanai, maybe. What in the debate that we've had over the last year, what we've not talked about is, we on the neighbor islands need the firm power backup that Oahu provides. We're seeing this on Maui where the grids are reaching saturation. You cannot, in some areas of our grid system, you can no longer do photovoltaic because we've reached too much. Can you believe this? Too much renewable. We need the firm power that's produced here to allow for our renewables to grow. So, as a whole, the cable initiative, I think, is a good initiative. I think if we have to bypass Molokai, we bypass Molokai. Lanai, it may bring down their power rates quite a bit, and they may have to redo how and where they put the windmills, but it may work on Lanai. And wind is not the entire scenario. So our photovoltaic, our wind, even our wave energy. Maui, in Pe'ahi, there's some experiments on wave energy. And if we look at that and combine all of that, we're going to be producing too much renewables that our firm power cannot back up. So, that's why I'm saying we need the firm power capacity of Oahu to back us up on the islands.
Well, there's some interesting businesses that are really trying to assist. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, as a for instance, is bringing in a fleet of electric vehicles. And so they're looking at how they can find charging stations. And of course, we have a law in the books that requires any place with over, 100 parking spaces has to designate one space as a renewable and put the charging station there. And so that might open up some other opportunities for other businesses to maybe put photovoltaic on their covers over the parking lots, like they did over at 5A Rent-A-Space in Honokawai on my side of the island, making sure that their entire complex, as well as the little strip mall that's next to it, is off the grid, so to speak. And so, there's some of these initiatives that we see happening on Maui, and a lot of our constituents are really very interested in going a little bit greener, going to photovoltaic, but we do run into grid issues. That's why the initiative that the county is engaged with Japan is really important. That's why it may be important to look at the undersea cable just for taking some of that excess wind energy that Maui Island can produce and create that firm backup. But those are all things that are far into the future, and we don't have the programmatic EIS done yet for the inter-island cable. But there's some very interesting renewable energy projects throughout the state. On Kauai, for instance, I think they may well be sustainable, which might be a good thing because we can't get the cable likely over to Kauai because of the depth of the ocean. But I think we're on a good track to, I don't know whether Senator English's vision of when he was chair of energy and the environment of hitting those portfolio standards are going to be realized, but I think we're going to be very close.
Yeah, I think we will, and that's, like what we said, one solution creates a whole set of other problems. So we never anticipated the idea of too much renewables, which is what's happening in some areas of Maui. So, all of us have gotten calls by people saying, I wanted to put a photovoltaic system in and the utility said I could not. The reason is in that particular grid, there's just too
Maxed
many
out.
people doing it. So it says that it's catching up, people want to do it, people are happy with it, now we have to increase the capacity to allow it to happen.
And with more and better battery storage. What some folks are saying is if we can, because we have a lot of wind at Kahiava, maybe there's a way to, by storing it, then you could feed it to some of the hotels in Wailea when off-peak hours, and you use it almost 24/7, because right now you drive by and sometimes the windmills are off even when it's a very windy day because the utility can't take it off.
Excellent, thank you. We're running out of time. Is there any last thoughts that you would like to convey before we close up? We've got like a minute left. Interesting stories that occurred during interim.
Well, we're heading into the next session. We start in a couple of weeks, and we're gearing up. Everybody's here, and the hearings have started. So, we're in full swing. We've had a productive interim. Lots of things happened. We had some very big conferences in Hawaii, APEC, of course, being the largest one. I haven't heard the final numbers, but upwards of over $100 million plus that came into Hawaii's economy, direct spending, and they haven't calculated the indirect spending yet. So we've had a productive interim.
It's been very busy.
And we're cautiously optimistic. I think there were a lot of tough decisions that we had to make over the last several years, and I think finally we're starting to see some of those benefits. I think for the first time in a number of years, we're not going to be chasing a huge budget deficit. Cross our fingers. I mean, we still have 2.5 weeks till opening day, and anything can happen. But I think we're off to a good start. I think the governor's ambitious initiative to float $1.3 billion in bonds was a great sign. I think it shows the credit worthiness of the state of Hawaii, and some of our tough decisions that we made will provide for, I think, a solid foundation as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Senators, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Maui Mana'o, and of course, we'll see you next time. Aloha and mahalo.
Aloha.
Aloha.